James sat across from me at our usual Sunday morning spot and said those 4 words that changed everything. I need a break. No explanation, no warning I could see coming. 6 months later, when I spotted him with another woman at the downtown bookstore, all the pieces finally fell into place. Let me tell you how it all began. I'm Sarah, and at 32, I thought I had life figured out pretty well. I was teaching high school English in Millbrook, our small town of about 8,000 people. You know the kind of place, where everyone knows everyone, where you can't buy milk without running into someone from high school, and where finding real love feels like discovering a treasure. James and I met at the Harvest Festival 5 years back. He was working the volunteer fire department booth, selling raffle tickets for one of those beautiful handmade quilts the church ladies make. I was there with my students, helping with the face painting booth. When little Tommy Morrison broke free and ran straight toward the busy street, James didn't hesitate for a second. He scooped that boy up like he was family, grinning as he carried him back to safety. That's when I knew James Mitchell was something special. He worked as a project manager for the county, steady work with good benefits, the kind of job that meant security in a place like Millbrook. James had this gift for making everyone feel heard, whether he was dealing with frustrated folks calling about potholes or listening to me complain about difficult parents during report card season. Our courtship was the kind you read about in good books. Sunday dinners at his parents' house became our tradition. His mother Dorothy would make her famous pot roast, and we'd sit around that old kitchen table talking about everything under the sun. James would hold my hand underneath the table, his thumb making little circles on my palm in a way that made me feel completely cherished. But like most love stories, ours had its rough patches. About 2 years in, James went through what I can only call a crisis of confidence. He started questioning everything. His job, his life in Millbrook, whether he was truly happy. The conversations went in circles, and honestly, they wore me out. He'd wake up at 3 in the morning, staring at the ceiling, wondering if there was more to life than what our little town could offer. Maybe I should have gone to college, he'd say, though he'd built a perfectly good career without it. Maybe I should have traveled more, seen more of the world. I tried to be understanding, but it scared me. I'd grown up in Millbrook too, and while I'd gone away to the state university for my teaching degree, I'd always known I'd come back home. This place was in my bones. These people were family. Starting over somewhere else felt overwhelming. Our first breakup happened on a rainy Tuesday in March. James said he needed to figure himself out, and it wouldn't be fair to drag me along while he did it. I was heartbroken, but tried to be mature about it. Maybe he really did need space. Maybe this was something he had to work through on his own. We were apart for 3 long months. In a town the size of Millbrook, you can't really avoid anyone, so I'd see him around, at the grocery store, at the gas station, and we'd nod politely like we were acquaintances, instead of 2 people who'd shared a bed and dreams of growing old together. I threw myself into my teaching, staying late to grade papers and plan lessons. My friends tried setting me up with other men, but my heart just wasn't in it. Then one evening in June, James showed up at my apartment with peonies, my favorite flowers that most people don't even know exist. He'd been thinking, he said. He'd realized that all his wondering about what else might be out there was just fear talking. Fear of commitment, fear of settling down, fear of admitting that what we had was exactly what he wanted. I was a fool, he said, standing in my doorway looking more vulnerable than I'd ever seen him. I thought I was missing out on something, but the only thing I was missing was you. Looking back, I should have made him work harder for my forgiveness. I should have asked tougher questions, demanded better answers. But when the man you love shows up with your favorite flowers and admits he was wrong, well, it's hard not to soften. We got back together, and for the next 1.5 years, everything felt perfect. Better than perfect, actually. James seemed to have worked through whatever had been eating at him. He was more present, more loving, more committed to building our future together. He started talking about marriage in real terms, instead of vague some days. We looked at houses, compared mortgage rates, debated whether we wanted a big wedding or something small and intimate. I even started browsing engagement rings online, not to drop hints, but because I wanted to be ready when the conversation happened. Last Christmas, James gave me a promise ring, a simple band with a small diamond. Next year, he said, this will be the real thing. I believed him completely. Why wouldn't I? Spring brought talk of actual timelines, a fall engagement, maybe a summer wedding the following year. James even started coming to those wedding planning seminars they hold at the community center. He'd take notes, ask questions about catering and venues, like he was planning the most important project of his life. Now, when I look back, I can see there were small signs that something was changing. James started working later, taking on extra projects that kept him at the office past dinner time. He'd come home tired and distant, claiming work stress. When I suggested he talk to his boss about the workload, he'd brush me off. It's just temporary, he'd say. Once we get through this budget cycle, things will settle down. He also started spending more time with his coworkers. Team building events, Friday happy hours, weekend volunteer projects. It wasn't unusual. James had always been social, but something felt different. He'd come home from these gatherings talking about people I'd never met, sharing inside jokes I didn't understand. I thought he was just building stronger friendships at work. I was proud of him for it. I never imagined those friendships would end up destroying what we'd built together. The talk that turned my world upside down happened on a Thursday evening in early October. I remember the exact date, October 7th. Because it was the same day I'd finally worked up the courage to show James the engagement ring I'd been secretly hoping for. I'd made his favorite dinner, beef stew with fresh bread from the bakery downtown. I'd even picked up a nice bottle of wine, thinking we could celebrate the weekend and maybe have one of those deep conversations about our future that had become so precious to me. James got home later than usual, around 7:30. He seemed agitated, like his mind was somewhere else entirely. He barely touched his food, just pushed the stew around his bowl while staring out the kitchen window. "Everything all right?" I asked, reaching across the table to touch his hand. "You seem a million miles away." He pulled back slightly, not dramatically, but enough that I noticed. "Sarah, we need to talk." If you've ever been in a serious relationship, you know exactly how those 4 words land. They hit your stomach like a rock thrown into still water, sending ripples of anxiety through your whole body. Nothing good ever follows. "We need to talk." I set down my fork, my appetite gone. "What's wrong?" James ran his hands through his hair, something I'd always found endearing, but now seemed filled with stress. "I've been thinking a lot lately. About us, about where we're headed, about whether I'm ready for all of this." "All of what?" I asked, though I was starting to understand. "Marriage, the house, the whole settled down life. I look at some of my coworkers, and they seem so, I don't know, so sure of everything, and I'm just not sure I'm there yet." I felt like I was reliving our conversation from 3 years before, the one that had led to our first breakup. "James, I thought we'd worked through all of this. I thought you were sure about us." "I was. I am. It's not about you, Sarah. It's about me. I need some time to figure out what I really want." "What kind of time?" "I think we should take a break." The words hung in the air like smoke. I could feel my heart racing, my hands getting clammy. A break? What exactly does that mean? I don't know. I just know that I can't keep moving forward when I'm feeling so uncertain. It's not fair to you, and it's not fair to me. I stared at him, this man I'd loved for 5 years, this person I'd rebuilt my life around after our first breakup. "James, if you're having doubts, we can talk about them. We can work through them together. That's what people do when they love each other." "That's just it," he said, finally meeting my eyes. "I don't think I can work through them with you. I need to figure this out on my own." "How long?" "I don't know. What are the rules? Are we broken up? Are we just paused? Can we see other people?" He looked uncomfortable, shifting in his chair. "I don't know, Sarah. I haven't thought that far ahead." But something in his expression told me he had thought about it. There was a flicker of something, guilt, maybe, or anticipation, that made my stomach clench. "There's someone else," I said. It wasn't a question. "No," he said too quickly. "It's not like that." "Then what is it like?" "I just need space. I need to figure out who I am outside of this relationship." I felt tears starting to burn behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not yet. So what happens now? Do you move out? Do I move out? Do we pretend we're strangers when we see each other around town? I don't know, he said again. I haven't figured all that out yet. His complete lack of a plan was almost worse than the request itself. If he'd come to me with a clear timeline, specific boundaries, some evidence that he'd really thought this through, maybe I could have respected it. But this felt impulsive and selfish, like he was asking me to put my life on hold while he decided whether I was worth keeping. I think you should leave, I said quietly. Tonight. If you need space, then take it. But don't expect me to sit around waiting while you decide whether I'm worth committing to. Sarah, please, don't make this harder than it has to be. I'm not making it anything. You're the one changing all the rules. He left that night, packing a bag with enough clothes for a few days. Said he'd stay with his buddy Marcus until he figured out something more permanent. Said he'd call in a few days to talk about the practical stuff. Who would get what? How to handle the lease, whether we'd still go to his cousin's wedding next month. But he never called. Days passed, then weeks. I'd see his truck around town sometimes, but we never crossed paths directly. It was like he was deliberately avoiding me, which hurt more than I wanted to admit. The truth revealed itself 6 weeks later on a Friday evening in late November. I was at the bookstore downtown, browsing the new releases, and trying to distract myself from the fact that James and I should have been picking out Thanksgiving decorations together. That's when I saw them. James was in the little coffee shop section, sitting at a corner table with a woman I didn't recognize. They were leaning close together, talking in that intimate way couples do when they're sharing secrets. She was laughing at something he'd said, touching his arm in a way that was far too familiar for casual acquaintances. My first instinct was to turn around and leave before they noticed me, but something kept me frozen in place, watching this scene unfold like a car accident you can't look away from. The woman was beautiful. I had to admit that. She had that polished, professional look that suggested she worked in an office, not like those of us who spent our days with teenagers and went home with chalk dust on our sleeves. Her hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless, her outfit put together in a way that showed real thought. As I watched, James reached across the table and took her hand. Not in a friendly way, but the way you touch someone you're romantically involved with. The way he used to touch me. I must have made some sound, a gasp or sharp breath, because James looked up and saw me. The expression on his face was pure panic, followed quickly by guilt. He said something to the woman, who turned to look at me with curiosity rather than embarrassment. Then James stood up and walked over to where I was standing, still frozen like a deer in headlights. Sarah, he said, his voice carefully controlled. Hi, who is she? I asked, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. Her name is Rachel. She works at the county office. How long? Sarah, it's not what you think. How long, James? He glanced back at Rachel, who was still sitting at the table, watching our conversation with interest. A few months. A few months. I let the words sink in. So when you asked for a break, you already had someone waiting in the wings. It wasn't like that. We were just friends at first. And now, it's complicated. I felt something click into place inside me, like a puzzle piece finally finding its spot. The hurt and confusion I'd been carrying for weeks suddenly crystallized into something clearer and more manageable. Anger. It's not complicated at all, I said. You wanted to have your cake and eat it too. You wanted to see where things went with her while keeping me as a backup plan in case it didn't work out. Sarah, please, can we go somewhere private to talk about this? I don't think there's anything to talk about. You made your choice. You chose her. I didn't choose anyone. I'm still figuring things out. Well, let me make it easier for you. Consider things figured out. We're done, James. Not on a break, not taking time to think. Done. I turned to walk away, but he caught my arm. Sarah, wait. This isn't how I wanted you to find out. How did you want me to find out? When I got your wedding invitation in the mail? I never meant for it to happen this way. But you did mean for it to happen. That's the thing, isn't it? You didn't stumble into this by accident. You chose to pursue her while you were still with me. He didn't deny it, which told me everything I needed to know. I went home that night and cried harder than I had since my grandmother passed away. Not just sad tears, but angry tears, frustrated tears, tears of betrayal, and the special kind of hurt that comes from realizing someone you trusted completely has been lying to you for months. The next morning, I called my best friend Emily and told her everything. She was furious on my behalf, using language that would have made my students blush. But she was also practical. "What are you going to do?" she asked. "I don't know. Stay here and run into them constantly? Pretend I'm fine when everyone in town knows exactly what happened? You could leave. Leave Millbrook? My job's here. My family's here. My whole life is here." Your life was here when it included James. Now it's just a place where you're surrounded by memories of someone who treated you badly. She was right. Millbrook suddenly felt like a sweater that had shrunk in the wash. Everything too tight, too small, too full of reminders of what I'd lost. I started looking at job postings online, mostly as a distraction. But the more I looked, the more appealing a fresh start seemed. There was an opening at a high school in the city, about 3 hours away. Bigger school, more diverse students, better resources, and higher pay. The kind of position I'd always thought I might want someday, but never had a reason to pursue. I applied on a whim, not expecting much. But they called for an interview, and the interview went well. And before I knew it, I had an offer. Taking it was easier than I'd expected. I gave my notice at Millbrook High, broke my lease, and started packing up the life I'd built in my hometown. My parents were worried, but supportive. My friends were sad to see me go, but understood why I needed to leave. The hardest part was not telling James. Part of me wanted to let him know I was moving on, literally and figuratively. But another part, the part that was still hurt and angry, wanted him to discover my absence the way I'd discovered his betrayal. By accident, when it was too late to do anything about it. I left Millbrook on a cold December morning, my car packed with everything that mattered. I didn't look back as I drove out of town, but I couldn't help thinking about all the times James and I had driven this same route together, going to the city for concerts or shopping, or just to feel connected to something bigger. Now I was part of something bigger. But I was doing it alone. The city was overwhelming at first. After spending my whole life in a place where you could drive from one end to the other in 15 minutes, the urban sprawl felt endless and anonymous. But there was something liberating about that anonymity too. Nobody knew my story here. Nobody looked at me with pity or curiosity about why I'd left everything behind. My new apartment was tiny, a 1-bedroom in a converted warehouse, nothing like the spacious place James and I had shared. But it was mine. I decorated it with things I'd always wanted but never bought because they didn't fit James's more traditional taste. Bold colors, interesting artwork, plants that needed actual care and attention. The new job was challenging but energizing. The students were more diverse, more engaged, more willing to push boundaries and ask tough questions. I found myself staying late not because I was avoiding an empty apartment, but because I was genuinely excited about the lessons I was planning. I made friends slowly but surely. Other teachers who were also transplants from smaller towns. Neighbors who were building their own new lives for their own reasons. People I met at book clubs and coffee shops who didn't know anything about my past except what I chose to share. For the first time in months, I felt like myself again. Not Sarah, who got abandoned by her fiancé, but just Sarah. A teacher who cared about her students, a friend who showed up when people needed her, a person who was building something meaningful. I didn't think about James every day anymore. When I did think about him, it was with a kind of detached curiosity, like wondering about a character in a book I'd read long ago. But life has a way of bringing the past back when you least expect it. It was the Friday before Christmas, and my new school was hosting its annual holiday party. I'd been looking forward to it for weeks, my first real social event as part of the community, a chance to celebrate the end of my first semester and the beginning of what felt like a completely new chapter. I'd bought a new dress for the occasion, something I never would have worn in Millbrook because it was too bold, too sophisticated for the person I'd been. Deep emerald green, well-fitted, the kind of outfit that made me feel confident and beautiful. The party was at a nice hotel downtown, and I'd taken a cab so I could enjoy a glass of wine without worrying about driving. The ballroom was decorated with twinkling lights and evergreen garlands, and a jazz trio was playing soft music in the corner. It felt magical, like something from a movie. I was talking to Mark, one of the other English teachers, about our spring semester plans when I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Sarah?" I turned around and there was James. He was wearing a suit I'd never seen before, looking older somehow, more worn down than I remembered. For a moment, I wondered if I was imagining things. What would James be doing at a teacher's holiday party, 3 hours from Millbrook? "James," I said, my voice sounding calmer than I felt. "What are you doing here?" "I'm here with Rachel. She got a job with the city planning department. We moved here about a month ago." Of course they did. Just when I was starting to feel settled and safe, James would appear in my new life like a ghost from Christmas past. The conversation that followed was awkward and painful. James claimed he'd made a mistake, that he was sorry, that he wanted to make things right. But I could see through it all. He didn't want to make amends. He wanted to feel better about what he'd done. "You don't get to do this," I told him. "You don't get to show up in my new life and expect me to help you feel better about the choices you made." But James, I was learning, wasn't the type to give up easily, and what started as an uncomfortable encounter at a holiday party was about to become something much more serious. Later that evening, as the party was winding down, Rachel approached me. I recognized her immediately from the bookstore, though she looked different, tired, less polished than before. "You're Sarah," she said. It wasn't a question. "I am." "I'm Rachel. I think we need to talk." What Rachel told me that night changed everything I thought I knew about what had happened between James and me. She revealed that James hadn't asked for a break because he was confused about our relationship. He'd asked for a break because she'd given him an ultimatum: choose her or lose her. He wanted to keep both of us, Rachel explained, so he came up with this break idea as a way to have it all. He thought he could string you along while he decided whether I was worth giving up his comfortable life with you. The manipulation was breathtaking. All this time, I'd been thinking James had gotten confused, had started doubting our relationship naturally. But the truth was much worse. He'd been backed into a corner and had chosen to lie to me, rather than be honest about what he wanted. Rachel also warned me that James had been trying to track me down, asking mutual friends about where I lived and worked. She thought I should know, especially since they'd broken up and he'd been bothering her constantly, trying to get back together. "He's convinced himself that you two are meant to be together," she said. "That what happened with me was just a mistake, a detour on the path to your happily ever after." "There is no happily ever after," I said firmly. "Not for us. I know that. You know that. But James is living in a fantasy world where he can undo the past and win you back through sheer persistence." Her words proved prophetic. Within days of the holiday party, James began what I can only describe as a campaign to win me back. Flowers delivered to my apartment, constant phone calls, showing up at my school. I changed my phone number and started having Mark walk me to my car each day. But James was relentless, and I began to worry that this was about more than just wanting forgiveness. This was about control, about not being able to accept that I'd moved on without him. The situation came to a head in January. James had been escalating his behavior: longer waits in the school parking lot, more frequent appearances near my apartment building. I'd started varying my routine, looking over my shoulder, feeling like a prisoner in my own new life. Then one evening, as I was leaving the grocery store, James was waiting by my car. "We need to talk," he said, just like he had that night in October when he'd asked for a break. "No, we don't," I replied, keeping my distance. "We have nothing to talk about. Sarah, please. I know I made mistakes, but I love you. I've always loved you. If you loved me, you would respect my wishes and leave me alone. I can't do that. I can't just give up on us. There is no us, James. There hasn't been for months." That's when I saw it, a flash of anger in his eyes that I'd never seen before. Not the James I'd known and loved, but someone else entirely. Someone who didn't like being told no. "You can't just throw away 5 years, he said, his voice rising. "You can't just pretend what we had didn't matter." I'm not pretending anything. I'm moving on. That's what people do when relationships end. It doesn't have to end. It doesn't have to be over. I realized then that James wasn't just persistent, he was delusional. He'd created a fantasy in his mind where our relationship was something worth fighting for, where his betrayal was just a minor bump in the road to our inevitable reunion. Yes, it does, I said clearly. It's over, James. It's been over since the night you asked for a break to be with someone else. And if you don't stop this behavior, I'm going to call the police. I got in my car and drove away, watching in my rearview mirror as James stood in the parking lot, looking lost and confused. I did call the police, and I filed a report, not because James had threatened me physically, but because his behavior was escalating, and I wanted it documented. The officer who took my statement was kind and understanding, and he helped me understand my options. I also called James's parents. It was a difficult conversation, but Dorothy and Frank Mitchell were good people who were horrified to learn what their son had been doing. They promised to talk to him, to help him understand that his behavior was inappropriate and needed to stop. Most importantly, I called my own parents and told them everything. I'd been trying to protect them from the worst of it, but I realized I needed their support. They were angry and worried, but they were also proud of how I'd handled the situation. "You've grown so strong," my mother said. "Stronger than I ever imagined you could be." The intervention worked. James's parents had a serious talk with him, and the police visit seemed to wake him up to how his behavior was being perceived. The flowers stopped. The phone calls stopped. The appearances at my school stopped. A few weeks later, I heard through the Millbrook grapevine that James had moved away, not just from the city, but from the state entirely. He'd taken a job in another part of the country, starting over somewhere new. I felt a mixture of relief and sadness. Relief that I could finally live my life without looking over my shoulder. Sadness for the man I'd once loved, who'd allowed his poor choices to spiral into something much worse. But mostly, I felt free. It's been a year now since James left, and I can honestly say I'm happier than I've been in a long time. My job is fulfilling, my friendships are genuine, and I've even started dating again. Carefully, thoughtfully, with a much clearer sense of what I want and what I won't tolerate. I've learned that sometimes the worst thing that can happen to you can also be the best thing. James's betrayal devastated me, but it also freed me from a relationship that wasn't as solid as I'd believed. It forced me to leave my comfort zone and build something new, something that was entirely mine. I don't hate James anymore. I don't love him either. He's just someone I used to know, someone who taught me important lessons about trust, respect, and the importance of being true to yourself. The break he asked for was supposed to give him time to figure out what he wanted. In the end, it gave me something much more valuable, the chance to figure out who I was without him and to build a life that didn't depend on anyone else's approval or commitment. Sometimes the best thing you can do is let someone go, even when, especially when, they don't want to be let go. I'm Sarah, I'm 33 years old, and I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be.